Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my NFL Conference Championship game predictions. So last week in the division round, I had a pretty good week because I went 3-1, and that brings my record on the season to 184-97. But getting ready to things and kicking things off with the AFC Championship game, we've got the Patriots at the Broncos. This is an interesting game, as we've got the 2-seeded Patriots, who are coming in off a 28-16 win over the Texans, against the number 1 seed Broncos, who last week beat the Bills at 33-30 in overtime. But in last week's game for the Broncos, Bo Nix obviously got hurt, and he's out for the season. So Jarrett Stidham will get the start at quarterback for the Broncos. But despite him starting, I still think this could be a pretty good game. But Jarrett Stidham gets the start for the Broncos, and he's making his first start of the season, and the 5th start of his career. And so far in his career as a starter, he's 1-3. And in this game for Jarrett Stidham, he will also attempt his first passes since week 18 of the 2023 season. So it's been a while. And so far in the career for Jarrett Stidham, he hasn't exactly been great, with 8 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. But despite Jarrett Stidham not being the greatest, I think he could have some success in this week's game, because he's playing behind a great offensive line, he's got experience in the system, and Sean Payton's also had some success in his career with backup quarterbacks. Plus, the Broncos also have a pretty good run game, and they also could get J.K. Dobbins back from injury, as he's been activated, or he could get activated from IR this week. But that'll definitely help the Broncos offense because J.K. Dobbins, he was great before he got hurt, as he was averaging 77 rushing yards per game and 5 yards per carry. But despite that for the Broncos offense, they're still in a pretty tough spot because they're playing at the backup quarterback against a great Patriots defense, as the Patriots so far on the season, they're allowing to 17.8 points per game, and they've been dominant in the playoffs, as over their 2 playoff games, they've allowed 19 points combined. Now on the flip side, the offense for the Patriots, they're pretty good, although I don't love this matchup for them. Because the offense for the Patriots, they're putting up 28.1 points per game, but they now face an elite Broncos defense that's allowing just 18.9 points per game. But a big reason I don't love this matchup for the Patriots is their struggles to protect the quarterback. Because Drake May has been sacked 57 times this season, including 10 times in their 2 playoff games combined. And the Patriots, they have faced 2 really good pass rushes with the Chargers and Texans, but things don't get any easier this week. In fact, they actually get harder, as the Broncos actually lead the NFL with 71 sacks on the season. And then another reason I don't love this matchup for the Patriots offense is the offense just hasn't been amazing in their 2 playoff games, as they scored just 16 against the Chargers and 28 last week against the Texans. Now I know scoring 28 is pretty good against the Texans, especially considering how good of a defense they have, but with the amount of times the Texans turned the ball over last week, the Patriots easily could have gotten to 40. Although, to be fair to the Patriots, they have played 2 real good defenses in the playoffs, so maybe I shouldn't be too hard on them. But this is a really interesting game, and something that makes this game even more interesting is Patriots have some history with Jarrett Stidham, as he actually started his career in New England and spent the first 2 years of his career as a backup for the Patriots. And speaking of backup quarterbacks with the Patriots, they've got some history with backup quarterbacks. Obviously, they lost to Nick Foles in the Super Bowl a few years ago, although at this point it's more than a few years ago. But speaking of Nick Foles and that Eagles team, there's actually some similarities between the Broncos team this year with Jarrett Stidham and the Eagles team with Nick Foles in 2017. As the Broncos, they're 4.5-point underdogs in this game, and they're the first team since the 2017 Eagles to be a home underdog in the conference title game. And in that game, the Eagles ended up winning 38-7 against the Vikings, so maybe the Broncos can do the same thing. But this is a really interesting game, and I definitely think this game can go either way. Now, a lot of people are taking the Patriots, and they're not really thinking too much about it because they're thinking the Broncos have a backup quarterback, Patriots probably the much better team, they should win the game. Now, that is true, although I do think this game is going to be pretty close. And I think the Broncos actually have a pretty good chance to win because they're at home. And they're actually 15-3 at home since the start of last season. And I actually think the Broncos have a really good chance to win if the Patriots play like they did last week with all the fumbles. But I'm still going to take the Patriots to get the win here. I think their offense does enough even against good defense. And I just don't see the Broncos offense being able to generate enough points against a great Patriots defense. So I'm going to take the Patriots to get the win and move on to the Super Bowl as they beat the Broncos and win the AFC by a score of 20-16. And moving on to the NFC Championship game, we've got the Rams at the Seahawks. And this is going to be a great game, as we've got the Rams who are coming in off a 20-17 overtime win over the Bears, against the Seahawks who last week destroyed the 49ers, winning 41-6. But this is going to be the 3rd time these 2 teams meet this season, and so far the home teams won each meeting. As the Rams won 20-17 in LA, and when the game was in Seattle, the Seahawks won 38-37 in overtime. But I think this is going to be another very close, good game. Now the offense for the Seahawks, they've been great, as on the season they're scoring 29.1 points per game, and last week they had a great game as they dropped 41 against a pretty good 49er defense. And last week the Seahawks also ran the ball very effectively, as they ran for 5.3 yards per carry and 175 yards. But the Seahawks offense didn't face a good Rams defense, as on the season, the Rams, they're allowing 20.7 points per game. Now, the Rams defense had not been playing that well prior to last week's game, as before last week, they were allowing 30 points per game over their last 5 games, but last week they had a much needed bounce back game, as they held a good Bears offense to just 17 points. And last week for the Rams, they also forced 3 turnovers, and they've now forced 31 turnovers on the season, which is top 5 in the NFL. And that could be a problem for the Seahawks, because they have turned the ball over quite a bit this season. Now, last week they played a clean game with 0 turnovers, but in the regular season they turned over 28 times, which was the second most in the NFL. And 7 of those 28 giveaways came against the Rams, so definitely something to watch. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Rams, they're also great, as they're scoring 30.1 points per game, although last week they did not have their best game, as they scored just 20 points against the Bears defense that's nothing amazing. And Matthew Stafford also did not play that well, as he completed under half his passes. Now, he is dealing with a sprained finger on his throwing hand, so I will give him a little bit of a pass, but definitely something to keep an eye on if he's not quite as good, which he'll definitely need to be pretty good against this great Seahawks defense. Because Seahawks defense, they're actually best in the NFL, as they're allowing just 16.5 points per game, and last week they absolutely dominated, allowing just 6 points. But this is going to be a great game, and I think this is going to be a higher scoring game, very similar to the second time these two teams met. Now, I don't think this game is going to be 38-37, but I do think both these teams put up some points. But this is a very tough game to predict. Now, the Seahawks are at home, and I do think they're probably the slightly better team, especially after last week, but I'm going to take the Rams. I just trust them a little bit more. When I originally made my playoff predictions, I had this matchup in the NFC Championship game. I took the Rams. I'm going to stick with that pick. My gut also says the Rams win, so I'm going to stick with my gut, stick with that original prediction, and I'll take the Rams to get the win in a great game by a score of 27-24. But those are my predictions for the NFL Conference Championship games this week. I've got the Rams and the Patriots meeting in Super Bowl 60. And we will also be having a live watch party for both these playoff games this week, so be sure to subscribe and turn notifications so you guys don't miss that. But those are my predictions for this week. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to put this as often as possible. Be sure to check out the post tab on my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think win the conference title games. But thank you for watching. I do my best to put this as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.